The waves lapped gently around them, the orange pink of twilight rippling across the sea. Emory suddenly grew aware of Julian's hand steadying him, holding him far longer than necessary. He tried to back away, but Julian's grip remained, firm but not forceful. "Julian." Emory's voice was low, uncertain. Julian's gaze didn't waver. His hands, wet and warm, slid gently to Emory's shoulders, holding him right in front of him as they locked eyes. "I can't help it," Julian whispered. And before Emory could respond, Julian kissed him. It was sudden, soft, just lips brushing lips, but it deepened in a way that caught Emory off guard. He stiffened. His heart slammed inside his chest. He tried to pull away. But Julian's kiss was tender, searching, almost familiar. And to Emory's horror, he didn't resist. His lips moved with Julian's. His eyes fluttered shut. His fingers clenched the fabric of Julian's soaked shirt. It was only when the coolness of the water brushed his cheek again that Emory snapped out of it. He gasped and pushed Julian away, breathing hard. They separated with a small splash, eyes wide, water dripping from their faces. Neither spoke. Julian's lips parted, as if to explain, but the words wouldn't come. Emory swallowed hard, his face flushed, not just from the cold. He looked away, guilt and confusion etched in every corner of his expression. Then, he turned and swam to the boat. Emory sat wrapped in himself, arms hugging his knees, shivering more from what had just happened than the chill. He stared blankly ahead, heart still racing. Julian climbed in a moment later, quiet. He pulled off his coat and held it out. Emory shifted uncomfortably. "I am not going to kiss you again," Julian said gently. "I swear." Emory didn't respond, but he let Julian wrap the coat around his shoulders. Julian's fingers brushed his arm just briefly, tender but restrained. The boat creaked as Julian sat opposite him and started the engine. The ride back was silent. But not empty. Emory kept sneaking glances at Julian, the man's eyes focused ahead, jaw tense, lips pressed tightly together. Emory couldn't read him. And worse, he couldn't read himself. Why did he kiss me? Why did I let him? Does he like me? But what about Hale? Am I just another name on his list? He stared at Julian's profile. He looked distant. Focused. The same man who teased and joked now seemed like a mystery Emory couldn't begin to solve. No, Emory decided. He must be a player. He's with Hale, and now. This? His jaw set. I need to stay away from him. I can't let myself fall into something messy. The boat docked quietly. Julian stepped off first, then helped Emory out. The weight of what had happened still hung between them like a dense fog. It started to drizzle. Emory pulled off Julian's coat and held it out. "Thank you," he said, barely above a whisper. Julian nodded. "Emory. About before." Nothing happened, Emory cut in quickly. His eyes flickered. "Let's just forget it." Julian hesitated, then nodded again, taking the coat from him. Neither of them said goodbye. They turned and walked in opposite directions under the fading light. Hearts heavy. Thoughts racing. And both wondering why forgetting was going to be so difficult. The place screamed wealth, gold accents, floor-to-ceiling windows with a city view, champagne already bubbling in tall glasses on a marble table. Thorne Mateo, mid-40s, suave and commanding, with a sharp jawline and tailored designer wear, welcomed him with a charming smile. "Hale Montgomery. So nice to see you again." "You look delicious," Thorne said with a smirk as he stepped closer. "I must say, when I saw you at the party, I couldn't stop thinking about you. I just had to see you again." Hale smiled, turning on the charm. "I know. I felt the same." Thorne handed him a glass. "I've seen some of your films. You've got something raw. It's not just your face or body, it's the way you act. You just need the right guidance. Is that a pitch? Hale teased, sipping the champagne. Thorne's eyes didn't leave his. It's a promise. I can give you the world, Hale. But only if you're good to me. There was no need for subtlety. Thorne stepped close, wrapping his arms around Hale's shoulder and pulling him close. Hale didn't stop him. It wasn't the first time Hale had used his looks, and more, for an opportunity. He knew how the game worked. And Thorne, rich, powerful, influential, was exactly the type of man he preferred to keep close. Their lips met, slow and then hungry. As things got heated, Hale broke the kiss briefly to ask, "Are you sure about everything you just said?" Thorne, voice low and breath heavy, nodded. "Completely. But I want to make sure no one gets in the way. Especially not that boy from the party. I found out his name was Ethan, was it?" Hale's eyes flickered, a tinge of annoyance surfacing. "Ethan's a nobody," he said, his voice sharper now. "He means nothing to me. He's a pest I want to get rid of." But Julian, Hale thought inwardly, Julian is different. Julian was a challenge, a trophy. He was something he couldn't quite figure out, but he wanted him under his thumb. One way or another. Thorne brushed his fingers down Hale's cheek, smiling. "Good. Then let's make tonight the beginning of something beautiful." He stepped back and gestured toward the bedroom. "Will you stay the night?" Hale looked around the lavish space, the silk sheets peeking from the doorway, the promise of power hanging in the air like perfume. With a sly smile, he replied, "Of course." As he followed Thorne inside, Hale was already calculating what roles he could land, who he needed to step over, and how far he'd go to have it all. In the game he played, love was disposable. But power? Power was everything. That night, Emory sat on the edge of his bed. His eyes were unfocused, staring down at nothing in particular, because his mind was very much somewhere else. Julian. The kiss. That moment. He exhaled, long and shaky, his hand unconsciously brushing his lips. "Why can't I stop thinking about this?" he muttered to himself. He tried to reason with his heart. "Julian isn't for you. He's with Hale. They're involved. You're a monk. You took vows. You were supposed to leave this kind of temptation behind." And yet, the image of Julian's face, wet from the sea, eyes intense, mouth only inches from his own, kept flashing before him like a fever dream he couldn't wake from. Frustrated, Emory stood up and he walked into the bathroom. Maybe a bath would clear his head, cool the tension crawling under his skin. He sank into the warm water, leaning back with a deep breath, trying to focus on anything else. But it was useless. The moment Julian had held him, the soft murmurs against his skin, it all returned, vivid and unrelenting. Emory's cheeks burned hot, not from the steam of the bath but from the shame of where his mind was wandering. No. Ashamed, he bolted upright, water sloshing over the tub's edge. He quickly rinsed off, threw on a robe, and marched out of the bathroom like he could outrun his own thoughts. His bare feet padded across the floor as he made his way to the one place he always found peace. His darkroom. Inside, red light bathed the space in an eerie calm. Emory had always loved photography. Capturing moments. Framing emotions. It had always felt like a silent kind of prayer. He busied himself with developing the film roll he had taken in the ship. And then it appeared, slowly emerging on the glossy paper beneath the solution, Julian. It was the photo he had snapped absent-mindedly, Julian walking toward him on the boat, sunlight bouncing off the water behind him, face partly in shadow, partly lit with that unreadable look of intensity. Emory swallowed, his fingers trembling as he lifted the image closer. Julian looked breathtaking. Too breathtaking. He wasn't sure how long he stared at the photo before reality snapped back into place. What am I doing? He whispered. He dropped the picture onto the table like it burned him. He took a step back, running a hand through his damp hair. No. No, this can't happen, he told himself. You're supposed to be healing. Serving. You're a monk, Emory. His breath came quicker, and for a moment he almost felt dizzy from the emotions surging inside him. To regain control, he dropped to his knees, hands clasped, eyes closing tightly. Forgive me, he whispered. Please, let me not be led into temptation. Help me find clarity, and purpose. And peace. And for a moment, in that stillness, the ache inside him dulled, just slightly. But the picture of Julian lying silently on the table behind him said otherwise. The rain lightly tapped against the wide glass windows as Julian sat behind his dark oak desk, fingers steepled in front of his lips, eyes distant. He had told himself to focus. Stay sharp, stay cold. Revenge first. Everything else, later. But every time he tried, Emory's face resurfaced, those soft eyes widening in surprise, the way he melted into the kiss for just a moment before pulling away. It was as if time had frozen in that moment, as if the world had held its breath. Julian let out a frustrated sigh and leaned back in his chair. Why him? Had been drawn to Hale, yes. The attraction had been strong, undeniably so. But it had always been surface level, lustful, calculated. Emory was different. There was something about his unwavering kindness, his quiet strength, the way he spoke to people, not above them. He wasn't naive, he was hopeful. And that was dangerous. Julian ran a hand down his face. This is the first time I've felt something like this. He murmured to himself. Damn it. He knew what it was. It wasn't just infatuation. It wasn't the thrill of the chase. What he felt for Emory was real, and that terrified him more than anything. The door creaked open. Nicky entered, holding a folder under his arm. He looked at Julian curiously. You look terrible, he teased lightly. Are you okay? Julian thought of telling him, but he was too embarrassed. It's nothing, he said. Nicky smirked but didn't push. He knew Julian too well by now. Instead, he crossed the room and placed the folder on the desk. I've looked into the Montgomery business, Nicky said, returning to business. They're crumbling faster than we expected. But there's a problem. Julian sat up straighter. What problem? Olivia, Nicky replied. She's more involved than we thought. Apparently, she's been financially propping Devon up behind the scenes. She has some kind of sway over him. Julian narrowed his eyes, brows furrowing. Why? I don't know, Nicky said. There's a lot of speculation, but whatever it is, she's a serious obstacle. If she buys into the business or becomes the major investor, we won't be able to acquire it. Julian leaned back again. So, she's the linchpin, he muttered. Remove her. And we won't have any more problems. Nicky tilted his head. What do you mean by remove? Julian's voice dropped, cold and calculated again. I mean we take her out of the game. Make sure she loses interest. Discredit her. Distract her. Whatever it takes. I didn't come all this way to let someone like her get in the way of what's mine. Nicky studied him. You're really going to go through with this, aren't you? Julian didn't answer. His gaze had turned steely again, emotion shut off like a switch. He wouldn't stop. Not until the Montgomerys paid. Every last one of them. A golden glow bathed the tastefully decorated space, every inch of the room oozing elegance. From the antique chandelier to the marble fireplace crackling with quiet heat, Olivia sat with a glass of white wine in hand, her silk gown gleaming like molten gold. Across from her, in a plush armchair that looked too soft for his stiff posture, Devon Montgomery sat, his face tight with frustration. I'm not satisfied with that amount, Olivia, Devon said bluntly, swirling the dark liquor in his own glass but not drinking. You know the company is worth twice that. Olivia took a delicate sip of her wine, then let out a small, amused sigh. And yet, she said slowly, voice syrupy and cool, you're sitting in my house, asking for help. Again. Devon clenched his jaw. It's not charity. Oh, no, Olivia smirked, setting down her glass. It never is, darling. But don't mistake pride for leverage, you don't have any. You've run your legacy into the ground. No investor will touch Montgomery Textiles unless I'm involved. I've built that company with my own 2 hands. And now you're watching it crumble with the same hands, she said, rising from her seat and walking over to him with an effortless grace. I'm offering you a way out. Devon looked away, jaw tight. Olivia leaned closer, her perfume subtle but commanding. I've always been the one to clean up your messes, haven't I? She whispered near his ear. Back then. And even now. Don't bring that up, Devon growled, shooting her a glare. That part of the past is done. Buried. Olivia raised an eyebrow, pulling back slightly but her smirk deepening. Is it? Funny how the dead don't always stay buried. Devon stood sharply, anger flashing in his eyes. Enough, Olivia. She sipped her wine again, unbothered. Relax. I won't say a word. For now. But you know me, Devon, I keep receipts. And I always know when to use them. Devon stared at her for a long moment before turning away, shoulders tense. Olivia smiled behind her glass, eyes gleaming with a quiet power. I'll have the papers drawn up tomorrow, she said softly. You'll take my offer. Because you don't have a choice. Just like you didn't, all those years ago. Devon didn't respond. Thanks for watching. Do like and subscribe to the channel for more episodes.